Thank you so much, Gretchen, and it's great to be here. And I understand this is going to be recorded as well. But boy, it's always nice to have at least a few faces to give your presentation to instead of just your, no offense, virtual audience in the future watching this, but it helps make it a little more motivating. So as Gretchen said, I'm Jessi Smith. I am your Chief Research Officer at UCCS, and I am a professor of psychology. And my area of expertise is motivation and diversity, particularly in the STEM fields. So the goals and aims of what our team that Gretchen is leading is trying to do is near and dear to my heart. So it's a pleasure to be here. I do want to just introduction to us. There's only a few of us here. So I think there's a few is the number of us. We can just go around, tell me a little bit about yourself and if you have one, what is your research interest? What is your, short elevator speech on the kinds of topics that you're interested in when it comes to research? So I would be grateful for that. So any volunteers to go first?
I can go ahead. So am I audible? Hello.
Great, thank you.
Thank you so much. So yes, hi, I'm Dr. Chancellor. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Denver. I go with the pronouns of she and her. My research focus is on the user side of privacy and security. I particularly focus on vulnerable population. And when I say vulnerable population, it is anyone who has like technological issues, who are not experts in that, to older adults, children, the population which we do not necessarily focus on. And from the digital interaction perspective, I focus on the privacy and security of how everyday interactions go through. So from online education to working with IoT devices, smart homes in our homes, to AR, VR technology. So all of these are the domains of research which I focus on. So I'm very excited to be a part of it because I think I keep on learning and improving the research statements in general for the grants which I'm applying for, even the elevator pitch and everything, right? So excited to be a part of this workshop.
That's wonderful. Thank you. My dogs are going to join in here too. Yes. Yes, please go on, Ricardo.
Okay. If there is nobody else, I'm Ricardo Unga. I'm lead faculty for the Department of Computer Science, Technology and Engineering of Colorado Technical University. I graduated from UCCS, actually a couple of degrees. And I'm actually doing some research work with the Department of Biophysics, Bioengineering. And yeah, I would like to learn how to write a research presentation or research paper. Somebody always has been doing it for me. So I appreciate this opportunity. Thank you very much.
Absolutely, that's wonderful. And I think, Greg, we might have one more if you're able to join us. Sometimes might be on mute there.
I think he was trying to get in a couple ways, Jessi, so he might not.
I was wondering that. I saw that too. Exactly. Well, Greg, if you are able, you could put in the chat perhaps a little bit about you, unless you're able to get that audio today.
I finally got in. Yes. I'm sorry. So what was the question?
It's a tough one. A little bit about you and your area of research.
Don't know what that is exactly yet. I'm one of the EDBA students in the cybersecurity program. I believe my topic is on data privacy in cybersecurity, and I'm still trying to narrow that scope of that topic down a bit.
That's great. That's what you're doing the right way to do that, right? That's why you go into these programs to sort of narrow that down and figure that out. So really grateful and appreciate your taking the time to introduce yourself. There's a number of reasons why you might be asked to give a research statement. So it could be for a funding proposal. It could be for a job. It could be for an award nomination. There are a whole number of reasons why you might be asked for a research statement. So of course, depending on who your audience is, it's going to change how you approach this important task in telling your research story. Generally speaking, if I were to narrow down why you want a research statement, so if we take a step back and think, what are you trying to do? Obviously, first and foremost, what's your research experience, and what kind of specific things do you need to do your research? Whether that's equipment, software, collaborators, you want to tie that into what your experience is. Maybe you've developed some software, maybe you've developed a survey. So talking about your particular experience and the tools that you need to be research successful. So that's definitely part of the first and foremost requirement. You're trying to tell the reader about you. So kind of like what we just did, but you probably go a little further and talk a little bit more about your methods. You're also really trying to make a convincing case to the reviewer, whether again, it's for a funding proposal, for a postdoc or graduate school or a faculty position, whatever it might be, that what you offer is exactly what they're looking for, right? So this is interesting because it means that you might have 3 or 4 areas of interest. You're going to go and look, thinking about where your audience is. Maybe you overemphasize one of those areas and you talk about it more than you maybe normally would because you want to fit well with whatever that funding agency wants, that reviewer wants, that job application is asking for. So you really are trying to convince the reviewer that what you have to offer is exactly what that agency or that organization is looking for. You also want to do it in a very enthusiastic way. So unlike other kinds of scientific writing, where you might be writing research reports or journal articles or conference presentations, which is going to be full of, very specific scientific jargon with citations, and it's going to be very organized. Here, you want to take a narrative. You should be using words like I and we, and you want to express enthusiasm and excitement for what brought you to doing this work and where you want to go with this work in the future. And I think sometimes we get stuck in sort of just sticking to the facts of the matter. And the research statement is the one place where you get to shine through with your personality and really showcase the enthusiasm and the passion you have for your work. It's also the case, this is where reviewers are trying to gauge your writing ability, right? So they are looking to see, is it well organized? Is it easy to follow? Does it flow really well? Because they're going to be expecting products out of you at some way, shape, or form down the road, right? Whether it's writing agency, if it's a funding report, whether it's writing manuscripts, whether it's writing letters of reference yourself down the road, that shines through, and that will come back a little bit later. So if we step back and say, okay, what's the themes here? You're really trying to show that you're organized, you've got experience, that you're compatible with the agency or the organization that you're trying to work for, including the department you're currently in. And if you're going up for promotion, that you meet, the mission of the university. So there's a range of things that you're trying to be compatible with, that you've got passion and enthusiasm, and that you should be hired or promoted or given all that money to make your research funding, right? So this is a big ask for a 1 to 3 page document. This is a lot. And that's why they're very important, and you want to take them in stride. So of course you have to read your requirements really carefully, right? Depending on what you're doing, like I said, if you're going up for promotion, if you're applying for a new position, if you're trying to get funding or an award, read the rules. I know, but it bears repeating. I can't tell you how often I see people that don't read the requirements and they get stuck. So it seems low level, but really important. When it says allowable, so it says not required, but allowable. My recommendation, you submit one. Read allowable as required. Because you don't want to miss out on an opportunity to discuss your work, to put it into context, to express that enthusiasm, and to map out your goals. So if it says allowable, do it anyway. and don't miss that opportunity. Typically, in the world that I live in, I see them ranging between 1 page to 3 pages. Often they give you 0 guidance. They'll just say, submit a research statement that's 1 to 3 pages. So you want to use headings, bullet point, really easy font. You know, this is not the time to have small margins and 8-point font. Don't try to cram too much into it. So make it look really readable, lots of white space, really nice and easy on the eyes. And really kind of depends on what else you're submitting, what you want to put in. So let's imagine you're going up for a position, whether it's for promotion or it's a new position. Well, are you also submitting a teaching statement? Are you also submitting letters of recommendation? Are you also submitting a list of all of your bio sketch that has all of your other citations on it, right? So depending on what else is already in the application package, you can skip some of that, right? You don't have to try to cram it all into these 1 or 3 pages. And you can even refer the reader and say, as it's, see my teaching statement for the way in which I bring research into the classroom or engage students in the research process. You can sort of refer the reader to something else entirely. So what type of statement you write, what you include, really actually depends a lot on what else you're allowed to be submitting. So keep that in mind. I'll pause here and see if there's any clarifying questions. I do have the chat open. If you have questions, feel free to type them in the chat as well. So what goes into this thing? Let's talk content. The most important thing is to describe your research with a very big picture overview. The tendency is to want to go narrow and specific and say, I'm answering this very small, narrow question using this very specific tool. You'll get there, but you've got to orient your reviewer. Don't assume they have a clue what you're talking about. Assume you're talking to me and I'm reading 500 of these and I don't have any idea what you do. I'm a social psychologist. I don't understand the cyber world that you do. So you need to go and assume that I'm smart and I don't have level of specificity. So big picture, so what? Why does it matter? Tell me your big picture point. And then you want to go ahead and describe that passion. Here's where, like, what brought you to this topic? What was there prior work that you found there was a hole in? And so you want to try to fill that gap. Is it an observation that you made early on in your career or a problem that you encountered that you tried to solve? Why are you interested in this topic? You don't need to spend a lot of time on it, but it's a place to start telling your story. Engage me and convince me that you have this passion for this and I can see where you've come from. It's also okay, and this is the place to do it, if you've experienced some challenges along the way, right? So and for me, I have a kid, and being a parent is clearly really important, but it also means that I don't have the same kind of capacity as some others might. So I might want to talk about, especially if I was a single parent, I might have had some other life circumstances. Maybe you're a non-traditional student. Maybe you've taken a winding path and you were in industry for a while, or worked, in military capacity for a bit. And sort of, it's just, what is your journey? And what, if any, challenges? And it's okay to talk about that. You don't want that to be 3 pages. It's not a personal essay, but it's good to humanize your story for the reader. My goodness, we're still in the middle of a pandemic, right? So Gretchen, you were just saying how this is the first time this bigger conference can get together, right? So all of us, we can't travel right now. Our networking capacity is limited. There's no helium. So if you do research with helium, you're in trouble right now. So these are the kinds of things that you can weave into your story to really inform the reader of your work. you do want to showcase your skill set, right? If you're really talented at, different kinds of equipment, different software, different platforms, maybe you've stood one up, maybe you repair, you're really savvy at repairing some equipment. What is a special skill set that you have and those connections, right? So here's the opportunity. You can talk about collaborators you've worked with, mentors and advisors that are in your circle. You could talk about organizations that you belong to and that you work closely with. What you're trying to do here is talk about how you're uniquely qualified and positioned, right? So of course, everybody has a basic level of knowledge, so you want to showcase what makes you stand out and have special skills. Now, this is an interesting one. A lot of us anymore, it's team science, right? Very rarely do we just sort of go in it alone and do our own thing. I'm not saying never, but it's really rare in today's interdisciplinary team science world. So more often than not, you probably have papers, projects that involve other people, right? It could be a former mentor or advisor. It could be students that work with you. Who knows? But you need to make clear what your role is in those team approaches, because that can be, people will, unfortunately, if they recognize somebody else's name in your work, they will probably assume that person was probably the brains behind that work. So you want to say, you played the connecting role, you brought a particular skill set, you analyzed the data, or you stood up the platform. Talk about what your role is and make sure you're giving yourself credit where credit is due. And of course, emphasizing you're a great team player, right? You're part of a team and you enjoy that if that's true. If it's not true, maybe don't mention that. And don't be shy about citing yourself. So that research statement, it's only 1 to 3 pages, but you might say, and as we had a patent application, or I submitted a conference proposal, and go ahead and cite yourself in that research statement. The reader, don't make it hard for the reader to find your work in your research statement. My last name is Smith. So often if I'm having to cite someone, right, and I'm like, so Smith, as Smith and colleagues, right? Well, they don't know if I'm talking about myself or some of the other thousands of people named Smith in my field. So I will actually often say in my work with my friend colleagues, and then cite, Smith et al. 2021, so that it's really clear that it's me that I'm talking about. Now, as we're winding down the research statement is where you really want to map out your goals, right? So link it to the project that you're talking about, or the job application you're putting in, the funding announcement that you're going for, the grad, postdoc, whatever it is you're trying to do with this research statement. Now is where you want to link it. You want to say, here are my goals. Here's how I think I want to be in 3 to 5 years, and how I really feel like I fit with my goals, fit your goals. And everybody wants to know what your potential for funding is, right? So if you have had funding, you can link to it and say, I've been funded successfully by Department of Defense, Department of Energy, whatever it might be. And if you haven't, that's okay. But you want to say, and I see myself being stood up for success to go after external funding, and list the names of the agencies that you think that you're going to be looking at for the next 3 to 5 years. It's okay if you don't end up going that direction, right? This isn't locking you really into anything, but you want to give enough information to show that reviewer that you have been thoughtful and careful in your plans for your goals, for your research, and where you see money coming in down the road. Going back, you're seeing this theme with the connections here. You really want to focus in on those connections, right? They are not evident in your vita or resume. They're not usually evident in your bio sketch or your other materials. So you want to use this space to talk about, how do you connect with other people in the department that you want to join or you're already in? How do you connect to local industry? How do you connect to associations, national associations? So you really want to position yourself? Are you on advisory boards? Are you a mentor to some students? Do you do, you know, are you an advisor for some summer camps for K-12 kiddos, right? What is your connection and contribution that kind of takes your research and brings it into the light of the world around you? This is, not everybody has this, and that's okay. And if you don't have it, you can leave it off, but it might be something to think about. How could you go get some experience like that? And I think that's sort of how I feel about all of these. If you're like, well, I don't actually know, Jessi, I don't have any answers to these, that's okay. But it's an opportunity for you to think about it and think about what could you do now so that you are better positioned to write a very complete, robust research statement in the future. So I keep mentioning this because especially when I'm reading research statements from the STEM fields, I find that the enthusiasm level can be low. This is a general observation that I've made. And it's too bad, because when you see one that has enthusiasm, it's so memorable. Boy, does it stick with you. They've told a story, they're passionate, they're interested in their own work and the lives of the world around them. So after you write it, I would go through and ask yourselves, can I add a couple sentences here and there throughout that would convey my passion and enthusiasm for this work, instead of it coming across as just a written narrative of your resume? Because that's boring. That's really boring to read. And the reviewers want to be captivated and to see you as a whole human. And this is your chance to do that with this research statement. So enthusiasm for the project that you work on, the connections that you have, the goals that you have, just try to think about how to infuse that in. So I want to pause here and see if there's any comments or questions. All right.
No, nothing. Just listening.
Okay, that sounds good. So what are some of the missteps that I see that I'd like to caution you against for research statements? What I often see is people write a research statement. You've probably written one already at some point to get where you are right now, right? Whether it's a faculty position or in graduate school, in your life right now, you've probably have some version of this started. And what I find is that people just go to that document, open it up, maybe update it a tiny bit, and then submit it. And I would do the same. I would start with sort of the basics, because the basic story is probably the same. It's not going to change, but you've got to tailor it. What are you trying to do? Are you trying to get promoted? Are you trying to land a grant? Are you trying to get that postdoc? Whatever the organization is that you're writing this for, they need to feel like this is the first time you've ever written this and it is just for them. So you've got to tie it in. I have seen people make the mistake of, unfortunately, like having clues that they clearly just copy pasted this and have sent it to a different university or sent it to a different reviewer, a different agency. And boy, does that show to me a lack of attention to detail, right? It's almost insulting, right? So, dear Dr. Smith, I'm so excited to apply for blah, blah, blah. The University of Texas is a great place for me. And I'm like, well, but I'm not in Texas, right? So be careful and make sure you tailor it. And the next two are sort of this notion of you got to hit the sweet spot. You don't want to be so ambitious and say, you know, your future goals include, you know, $10 million in funding and, you know, 3 patents and 3 public, like you want to not be so ambitious that the reviewer thinks you don't have a good understanding of what it takes to be successful. When you're laying out your future plans, and you have to do this when you get promotion and for tenure, you have to do this when you're trying to get a faculty job, when you're trying to land an award or a funding agency, you have to spell out your goals. And often reviewers will say, this is too ambitious. This is not realistic. So don't be too ambitious, but at the same time, don't get totally stuck in the nuanced weeds of, next semester, this is what I'm going to do. And in the first 100 days, here's my plan. If you get too in the weeds and the reviewer disagrees with you, they don't like your 100-day plan, then you're sunk, right? So you want to hit that sweet spot between sort of being vague, being realistic, being specific enough, but not too much. And I know that's really hard. Also, be careful with jargon. And for my cyber and engineering friends, I should have added this, be careful with acronyms. When by the end, every sentence is in capital letters and it's just a word salad of acronyms, you have lost your reader. That's actually one of the most common pieces of advice I give you. It's too jargony and you use too many acronyms. So just be very careful about that. Pick them carefully. Of course, use some acronyms as they're appropriate, but you might just have to spell some things out time and again. And unfortunately, just the age-old spelling and grammar error. I mean, how many times I've been there? Just today, I was rereading something for what I swear is the 6th time. Somebody else had also read it. And when I read it, I was about to hit send. And then I was like, oh my goodness, I found a typo, right? So of course it's never perfect. Of course it can always be made better, but you've got to read, set it aside, reread it, make sure that you don't want, this is not the time to have, you meant what, in my case, I had tense wrong, right? It should have been something in the past tense and it was in the present tense. It's not going to sink or it's not going to change the meaning, but it doesn't look good. So just make sure that you watch those for those mistakes and get out of those. All right, so how do you even start? For some of you, it sounds like you're very early, and for others, you've probably got a research statement and you're in that sort of spot about thinking about how to move it along or how to change it. So of course, it depends on where you are. If I were thinking about starting from scratch, my advice, of course, is always to start early. A lot of times we leave these research statements to the last minute because we're like, easy, I got that. First of all, I have a draft from like 4 years ago and it's not important. I want to think about, all the other things that go into my dossier or all the other things that go into my application, and so you think I'll just save this till last. And unfortunately, that is pretty obvious, right? Because that means it's not tailored. It doesn't tell a good story. There's no enthusiasm. It feels rushed. So please, please, please start early. I would outline those main topics. So I mentioned like the content, right? So just think about what are those main and just brainstorm what the ideas are. What do you want to put in what bucket? If you don't have a ton of connections to talk about, then maybe be like, I should start getting some more connections. Put that on a to-do list, but then don't worry about filling it in on the research statement right now. So start outlining and brainstorming keywords to get that ready, and read other people's examples. So if you're applying for funding to NSF, for example, or Department of Defense, you can generally find people's research statements. These are, especially as soon as someone gets funding, they are considered owned by the taxpayer, right? So they're generally public documents. You can also just ask people around you to share examples, former mentors, current advisors, people in your leadership circles. I'm sure Gretchen would probably be happy to connect you with people to get you some examples. It's so good because what you're going to find is you're like, oh, I like this one. And you'll be like, oh, this one is okay, but it doesn't capture my attention. So by reading other examples, I think you're really going to be pleased with a range of inspiring statements that will help you make yours all the better. Please, 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 if you've started early, you'll be able to do this last one, which is sending a draft to people that you trust. So here's what's interesting. So there's some research showing that some people really undersell their achievements and other people completely oversell, right? And by sending it to people that you trust, you can say, have I hit that right balance between taking credit where I am the leader and I was the thought leader on this and I was the person, you know, doing the heavy lifting, and acknowledging that you're part of a team and that this is a group effort and a collaborative endeavor. So sending a draft to people you trust, they can help round out where maybe you came on too strong, maybe you didn't come on strong enough, and they can give you that gentle feedback so you can make some edits there. Oops. Yeah, revise. So please just keep it. It can be a document that you come back to over and over again. For me, I often have a section in the very, probably the second paragraph, where I tailor it to the agency, or if I'm going up for promotion, or if I'm going up for a job, you know, this is where I would tailor it, and I highlight it so that I never forget, this is the section that must be changed over and over again. And then from there, you sort of have your document, and you can always, you go back to it, you revise it, you update it, and it's never done. Don't ever just think my research statement is finished and I never need to look at it again. It should be something you're continually advising or revising. I loved this paper in Science. It's 10 years old now, maybe, oh my God, 20. Like I can't even look at that. I just noticed 2002. But it still really resonates, and I often would send it to my own students or to early career faculty as they're thinking about research statements and research plans. I've put the link here, but basically if you just look up writing a research plan in Science, you'll find it. It's a short read, but I really like it. And I encourage you to take a peek at that paper. It's nice and grounding. For those with, if you're interested, if you're more earlier on, if you're if you're a graduate student, for example, or you're just looking for a change, our Center for Student Research, which is studentresearch.uccs.edu, also has some really good resources, and a human who will happily read your research statement and be one of those draft people that you send it to who you can trust. So our director of our Center for Student Research is both grad and undergrad research. Her name is Jennifer Poe, and part of her, one of the most enjoyable things she tells me that she can do is just connect one-on-one. You send her a draft, she's happy to proofread it, tell you if you've hit that sweet spot, tell you if she feels like you've got too many acronyms or it's too jargony. She's certainly a resource for those who might want it. So I pulled out one example of a research statement. This was actually, I believe, I pulled out 3 pages. I believe it was 4. So it's going to seem like there's a page missing, and that's true. There is. It's on purpose because I just didn't want to try to overwhelm my PowerPoint slide with multiple pages. But even if you just sort of visually look at this, right? So if you don't try to read it closely, what you see is really great white space, headings that are bolded. As the reader, I'm like, oh, current research section, future research section. That's really pleasant. And then I can see different subcategories of, you know, what kinds of work and processing and algorithms that this particular person is doing. And then, as you can see, they're citing themselves, right? They're saying in my previous work, and here's the citation number. And then they even have a little whole section on the sites that they gave, which is also quite nice. It makes it nice and easy. The reader doesn't have to go look at the rest of your biosketch or your resume or your vita. It's right there within the statement. So I wanted to share this because I liked, I think this is very easy to read, and it tells a nice story, and I think is a pretty good example. I'll also mention, if you look over here under related publications, one thing you might notice is this person has been so kind as to bold their name in their reference list, right? So it's some that have, you know, a lot of different authors on it. That is a really wonderful tip and strategy. And it doesn't matter if you're applying for funding or going up for promotion or applying for a job, make this easy. Bold your name in your own citations. that will really help the reader see very clearly, are you senior author? Are you first author? Are you middle of the pack? That's really easy to find your name. So just so simple, little formatting of bold. So that's where I wanted to end things. We have about 10 minutes or so for questions. Happy to dive into specific questions you might have and or just considered higher ordered questions. So any questions for me that I can address?
I have a little one. Before you start the research, usually you have a means of communicating with the organization that provide the funding, right? So you write a letter, a formal letter, and say, I'm planning to present this research statement and things like those, right?
Yes, that's a great point. So sometimes you have to put this information in what I would call a cover letter, right? So sometimes, so they might not need or want an sort of a whole other research statement that stands alone and is separate. And so in that case, it's sort of addressed as a cover letter, dear so-and-so, and then to put it in that format of still the same information, but you're totally right. Oftentimes it's in the form of a cover letter.
First of all, thank you so much, Dr. Smith, for the presentation. This was very helpful. I actually wanted my students to attend this as well, but this is our finals week. And I think this will be important for them in the future because at least some of them are hoping to go to academia. And some of the things which you mentioned, these seem like even like bolding your name up or like talking about your own research. I think this is important. And I'm also in the faculty search committee right now. So we could see even people with tons of experience, so great research, sometimes do not write about that. I'm like, why aren't you writing about it? So I was wondering that if we can get this presentation, so I would be definitely sharing it with my lab, if that's okay with everybody. And as I said, this is finals week, so unfortunately they are busy with other things, but I wanted to be here and share some of this in my lab meeting actually.
Absolutely. I'm certain that we recorded it. My slides are available. And one strategy might be for you to, when you finally have a lab meeting or to tell your students, hey, watch this, and then let's do a Q&A with you. So they could ask their questions to you in live, so they might, since I wouldn't be there, but absolutely available for that use. And you're right, this starts at this early level for students, right? And then you see even senior scholars who are, they're amazing, they have this great reputation, but it sure doesn't come across on the paper, right?
Of course, right, Minsan. Now things are also changing. Like previously, people were looking only into the research statement and teaching statement. Now, I know many universities are doing it, including my university, where they are asking also for the DEI statements and so on. So these also translate into that how they have collaborated. But in general, even for me, as I said, my target is on the grant perspective. So I would definitely add this. Also coming from academia, I always mention that I go through imposter syndrome. So mentioning my work, it becomes like, should I mention? I even cannot even say sometimes that I'm an expert or something like that. So I think this was really reassuring for me to mention that, okay, why this is important, because I felt the same way when I read about other people's work, right? Everybody, I mentioned that. So what did I contribute in that? Though sometimes it might be me driving the entire project. So I'm definitely going to take these notes for myself as well.
That is really, really wonderful.
And I'd like to highlight as well, we will have another workshop on writing a teaching philosophy and writing a diversity statement coming up. The one on the teaching philosophy will be on April 21st, and the one on writing a diversity statement will be on May 19th, for anyone interested.
Great, thank you so much.
Yeah, any other questions or comments? maybe Gretchen, you and I can connect a little bit at some point, but I'm going to put a link. You said something that really inspired me. I'm going to put a link in the chat. So part of my own work is actually on imposter syndrome. So I love that you use that phrase, and I'm putting a link in here that says stop. We've got to stop using that phrase because of the damage it does to those of us who feel like a sense of doubt, or are we not modest enough? Are we being too, braggart? So this is a really new article that came out maybe last month. It's easy to read, short and sweet, but maybe down the road, Gretchen can have me back and we can do a version of that talk as well.
Thank you so much. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Jessi. And it's funny, I just spent 2 hours here. I'm at the Women in Cybersecurity Conference, where we talked a lot about that and the manifestation of that, not just women themselves, but amongst women and between women, and kind of the dynamic that creates. So I'm really excited that I didn't realize that. I learned that about you, Jessi. So thank you so much. We really do appreciate this, and we do want this to be a continuing conversation. So if you do have any questions, or you want to have Jessi, speak with students or connect the folks, we are here for the CA community to do this. And obviously, CTU and DU are very big partners of ours in the CA community. And so we would love to have as much collaboration on these issues as possible, because we do need to feed the cycle, right? We need to get people not just going out into industry, not just filling those government jobs, but also being those instructors and those faculty members that do the really hard research and that bring the students into those conversations so we can build the workforce so that we can beat this thing, with 4 to 5 million jobs, in the next 5 to 10 years. That's a big demand. And so if we all can work together and help each other, that's really the goal of these initiatives. So I know, Jessi, you've got to get going, but thank you so much. We really appreciate your insights on this. And we look forward to if you can join us for the next 2 conversations. And by all means, reach out to us if you have any in-between questions and comments and contacts that you want to make. So Michael, over to you if you have any closing thoughts and comments.
Sure. I just want to thank you all for supporting our faculty development program. I appreciate all of you who are in attendance. This meeting is being recorded. We should have that recording up on our website within the next couple of days. I'm also happy to send that to anyone individually and can do so basically as requested. The goal of these workshops is to serve as a resource for those within the industry. This is the 3rd of 6 workshops. So we have a couple more upcoming, as I've mentioned, and we have another in June on tips and tricks for interviews. So anyone interested in that is welcome to join. The registration link is exactly the same. Please select what you're interested in.
I appreciate the workshop. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody. Take good care.
Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.